I know I've covered the origins of Hawkman and Hawkgirl before on this show, but that was 46 episodes ago, so we might be due for a little refresh.
In 1940, DC Comics introduced readers to Carter Hall, an Egyptologist who discovered two things. One, an unknown metal called nth metal, which could negate the effects of gravity, and two, that he was the reincarnation of an Egyptian prince named Khufu. Hall constructed a winged harness from the nth metal and began fighting crime using weapons from his museum. He also encountered a woman named Shaira Sanders, who it turned out was the reincarnation of Khufu's wife, Chaira. The two would eventually marry, and Shaira donned her own set of wings as Hawkgirl.
In the late 1950s and going into the 1960s, DC started reviving some of their Golden Age heroes and giving them more of a science fiction bent to them, and Hawkman was no different.
This Hawkman was Kadar Hall, police detective from the planet Thanagar, who came to Earth with his wife Shaira in pursuit of a criminal. The two liked Earth enough that they wound up staying,
where Kadar managed to find a lucrative job shilling for Baby Ruth bars.
That's why I eat Baby Ruth. It's got all the energy in there to put me right back at the top of my game.
Okay, in actuality, Kadar and Shaira Hall would wind up joining the Justice League and live on DC's Earth 1, while Carter and Shaira Hall would live on DC's Earth 2 with the other Golden Age comic book characters. However, in 1986, things would change as DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths event merged all their parallel Earths into one single Earth. And that would mean some changes for the Hawks.
In an attempt to straighten out the Hawkman continuity, DC merged the Thanagarian Hawkman with Carter and Shaira Hall into the avatar of a Thanagarian Hawk God. It didn't work, and the characters soon fell into limbo, with all three being considered dead.
Back in episode 29 of the Random Trade Review, we reviewed a JSA storyline called The Return of Hawkman, where, spoilers, Hawkman returned. However, there were a few other revelations.
First, nth metal was revealed to having come from Thanagar, Egyptians having harvested it from a downed spacecraft. Second, the metal had the ability to store the souls and memories of individuals who came into contact with it, explaining how Khufu was reincarnated as Carter Hall. Finally, Princess Shaira's soul, and thus the soul of Shaira Hall, had passed into the body of Shaira's cousin 2 times removed, Kendra Saunders, after a suicide attempt.
This meant that while Kendra possessed Shaira's soul, she didn't actually possess any of the previous memories from those lives. So when Carter returned to the land of the living and began treating Kendra as his long-lost love, she kind of balked at the notion. Like I said in the episode, I guess telling a girl that you're destined to be together because you're reincarnated Egyptian royalty doesn't work as well as it did in the 1940s. Anyway, the Return of Hawkman storyline proved successful enough that DC quickly greenlit a new Hawkman series co-written by JSA writer Jeff Johns and James Robinson. And today we're looking at the first arc of that series. This is Hawkman, Volume 1, Endless Flight.
Kendra pays a visit to her grandfather, former secret agent Speed Saunders. Kendra asks him about the night her parents were killed. He says it was a random act of violence. She's not so sure. Kendra produces a telegram from a man named Danny Evans of the Stonechat Museum located in St. Roque, Louisiana. The telegram was setting up a meeting between Evans and the Sanderses. It happened to be dated a few days before Kendra's parents were killed. Kendra is off to St. Roque to investigate. When Speed suggests calling Carter for help, Kendra states that she doesn't want him to be a part of this.
I should point out that this series is running concurrent to some events in the JSA storyline that was happening at the time. And at some point we're going to wind up covering that story, so I don't want to go too far in depth, but just to kind of give a light touch to it, Carter was getting a little clingy around Kendra, constantly trying to get her to remember her previous lives, and Kendra rebelled in a way that just led to a lot of friction happening on the JSA team.
Kendra arrives in St. Roque and goes to the Stonechat Museum. However, all she gets is stonewalled by Oliver, the museum's curator. He's met Hawkgirl before, and he knows that the woman talking to him right now is not Shaira Hall. It's then that Hawkman arrives. He reveals his identity and verifies Kendra as his colleague. It turns out that Speed called Carter shortly after Kendra left. Begrudgingly, Kendra shows Oliver the telegram and explains who her parents were. Oliver apologizes. The stone chat has hit some hard times recently and had to sell off much of its collection to a private collector. Danny Evans is Oliver's son, and he ran off to India in search of a jewel called the Eye of Shiva, which could hopefully help drum up interest in the museum again. Meanwhile, a man is informed via phone call about Hawkman and Hawkgirl's arrival at the museum. He immediately dispenses a man named Block to take them out. Having heard enough, Kendra exits the museum and prepares to go to India. Carter pursues her, but she doesn't want anything to do with him. This is her mission. The two are then attacked by Block, who tosses Carter into a nearby statue outside the museum, and Kendra briefly distracts the goon long enough for Carter to grab him and take off into the air. Hawkman then tosses Block straight to the ground below. After turning Block over to the police and apologizing for damaging the museum, Carter and Kendra talk. Carter honestly wants to help, not only help Kendra with her power and her memories, but also with her parents' murder. She reluctantly accepts, and the two decide to stop off for a burger. Shire always hated hamburgers. Carter takes Kendra to a storage facility containing the remnants of the past Carter had with Shira. It also contains the Thanagarian ship that Kadar Hall brought to Earth, and which would make for a faster trip to India. Back in St. Roque, Oliver and the museum staff receive a visit from Christopher Roderick, the collector who's been purchasing most of their artifacts. Roderick vows to own everything soon. The Hawks arrive in Amritar in the Punjab province of India. There they meet up with Daniel Evans' assistant Jaita. She explains that Roderick sent people after Danny to take him out and possibly get their hands on the Eye of Shiva. Their names, Tigress, Shadow Thief, and Copperhead.
Tigress is the daughter of two criminals, one of whom her mother actually operated under the name of Tigress. So she followed in their footsteps and became a globe-trotting spy and thief, appearing in several incarnations of the Injustice Society. Shadow Thief is Carl Sands, a thief who stole a Thanagarian shadow suit that enabled him to move within the shadows and steal objects at will. Eventually he made a deal with a demonic creature known as Neuron, and that gave him the ability to turn objects and people he touched into shadows as well. Also making a deal with the demon Neuron was Copperhead, a contortionist who wore a specialized helmet that could deliver a toxic bite. However, after his deal with Neuron, Copperhead became more of a snake-human hybrid who will occasionally eat people.
Jaita and the Hawks find Danny before the hired guns can kill him. Danny explains to Jaita that the Temple of Shiva is located underground as they try to escape. It's then that a third fighter enters the fray as the Punjabi military, who are also on Roderick's dime, launch a few rockets at the Hawks and the villains. The resulting explosion causes a cave-in and separates everyone into two groups, one consisting of Kendra, Danny, and Tigress, and the other consisting of Carter, Shadow Thief, Jaita, and Copperhead. Tigress soon discovers the Eye of Shiva and steals it, abandoning Kendra and Danny, leaving them to deal with the military, and Carter and the others find themselves under attack from a group of anthropomorphized elephant people.
Obviously, anyone with a passing knowledge of the Hindu religion would recognize these beings as being similar to the god Ganesha, the deity in charge of obstacles and their removal. In the book, though, these beings are referred to as the Komira.
Jaita recognizes that the group has somehow entered the Tamanash, the Battlelands, a hidden world Shiva created to keep her direct descendants hidden from the corruption of mankind. The Komira are then ensnared by the nets of another group known as the Machna. Believing that Carter and the others to be allies, the Machna take the displaced foursome back to their home city of Ulm. Elsewhere, Kendra and Danny are simultaneously fleeing the military and pursuing Tigress. As they do so, Kendra brings up her parents and the telegram that they received from Danny. Danny cannot recall sending a telegram. Back in St. Roque, police are investigating a series of murders involving a bow and arrow killer. As they continue their investigation, a certain Emerald Archer looks down and proudly proclaims another fat cat has gone down. Back in Ulm, Carter and Shadow Thief walk the streets after a feast was held in their honor. The two have formed an uneasy truce until they return to the proper plane of existence. This is made uneasier by Shadow Thief constantly making lewd comments of both Jaita and Kendra. The two of them then hear a noise which leads them into a chamber where they discover the Komira being used as slaves by the Machna.
They betrayed Shiva!
Hawkman and Shadow Thief get found out and are quickly overwhelmed. The Machna then inform them that Jaita and Copperhead will be killed for their distrust, also because Copperhead ate one of them. However, Hawkman refuses to yield and starts fighting back, leading the other Komira to join them. Outside, the sacrifices are interrupted by an attack of a group of Chimera from outside of Ulm. This coincides with the slave revolt, and the Machina are soon overwhelmed. Eventually, the Chimera earn their freedom. Meanwhile, Kendra, Danny, and the military catch up to Tigress. A fight ensues, and Kendra maneuvers Danny into taking back the Eye of Shiva. The two then return the jewel to the temple and use it to reopen the portal for Carter, Jaeta, and the others. As they return to their proper plane of existence, Jaeta plants a big smooch on Carter, much to Danny's surprise and a little to Kendra's chagrin. As the Hawks return to St. Roque with Danny and Jaeta, Roderick looks on in anger. Suddenly, he's struck by a voice in his head commanding him to kill the Hawks and fulfill his destiny. Elsewhere in St. Roque, another archery-themed murder has occurred, and the police begin gathering more evidence.
So, what's the deal with the voice in Christopher Roderick's head? And who does it belong to? Well, let's find out.
Shadow Thief arrives in St. Roque with a new artifact, the Cloak of Darkness. He turns the cloak over to Roderick, and the two begin talking about the Hawks, who are now working with the Stone Chat Museum. This leads Roderick to wonder about Carter and Kendra's previous lives. In ancient Egypt, the Prince Khufu and his wife Chayara were beloved and worshipped by all, particularly once the Egyptians learned to harness the abilities of nth metal. However, there was one that did not hold the royals in high regard. It was the high priest Hath Set, who believed the peasants were to be dominated. Returning to the present, Hawkman and Hawkgirl pay a visit to Roderick as Shadow Thief thieves. Carter delivers a message, leaves the Stone Chat and the people who work there alone, or Roderick is done. Returning to ancient Egypt, one day Khufu was called to the temple. There he found Chayara bound to the preparation table. As he tried to free his love, Hath Set stepped out of the darkness and plunged an nth metal dagger into Khufu's back. He then stabbed Chayara. Little did he realize that it was this dagger that would allow the two to be reincarnated throughout the ages. In the present, the voice calling to Roderick returns and directs him to a certain box. Roderick opens it and pulls out the dagger that killed Khufu and Chayara. Christopher Roderick is the reincarnation of Hath Set. Meanwhile, Carter and Kendra take in St. Roque's Mardi Gras celebration. Kendra isn't up for much, though, as she's still upset about the lack of information on her parents. Also, she knows Carter's better suited for the museum life, and not her. Still, she's willing to give it a try and asks Carter to buy her a sandwich. However, the celebration comes to a halt when an arrow takes out the parade's grand marshal. Kendra picks the victim up to take him to the hospital, and Carter takes off in the direction the arrow came from. He spots Green Arrow running along the rooftops. Green Arrow temporarily gives Hawkman the slip by hitting him with a net arrow. When Carter catches up to him and tackles him, Oliver screams that it wasn't him. It was a Green Arrow imposter. The two return to the Stone Chat Museum, where they meet up with Kendra. She's resistant to Ollie's charms. After all, she's worked with Black Canary. Green Arrow explains that a decade earlier, he and 5 other men invested in a project that never came to fruition, though they still own the plot of land which is just outside of St. Roque. The evil Archer has taken out 3 of those investors. Now 3 remain: Oliver Queen, casino magnate Alfred Schlesinger, and a man known only as Ludlow. The 3 heroes book it to Schlesinger's casino. Hawkman runs a distraction while Hawkgirl flies Green Arrow into Schlesinger's office. However, Kendra is immediately taken down by a webbing arrow. The lights come on to reveal Schlesinger is dead, and Ludlow's standing over him. It's Lucas Ludlow, a.k.a. the Spider.
Lucas Ludlow is the son of Thomas Ludlow, who was a hero known as the Spider until he fell from grace and wound up becoming a criminal. Both father and son are highly skilled archers who have the abilities to rival that of Oliver Queen. And in case you're wondering, no, neither of these two are related at all to the 30s pulp hero known as the Spider.
Green Arrow begins dodging arrows while trying to untie Hawkgirl. The Spider wounds Oliver's hand just as Kendra manages to wriggle free. The 2 archers begin firing each other and taking out each other's arrows in the process. Hawkman then crashes in the room just as the Spider manages to draw a shot on Hawkgirl. Carter leaps up and takes the shot for Kendra, allowing Green Arrow to shoot Ludlow in his aiming eye as he and Carter crash through a window. Kendra catches the 2 men, and when they return, the Spider is gone. Afterward, Hawkgirl talks with the police, who promise to help her find out what happened to her parents. Meanwhile, Oliver and Carter talk. Ollie leaves with some advice. Stop throwing yourself into work all the time, and take off the wings and mask, and enjoy actually being alive again. Later, Carter gets dressed for a date, though Kendra doesn't seem dressed for it. But that's alright, as it turns out he's really going out with Jaeta, leaving a somewhat disappointed Kendra behind.
And so concludes Hawkman Volume 1, Endless Flight. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I'll tell you this right now. The character interaction in this is really kind of spot on. There's great dynamics between Carter and Kendra. Kendra, Carter, and the people at the Stone Chat, and Jaeta, you know, even Christopher Roderick and Shadow Thief and people, all that stuff. I think there's kind of a good sort of bite to the dialogue, for lack of a better term. Like, it's not overly humorous or wisecracky, but you kind of get this idea of, you have Carter who's trying to still be supportive while not looking like he's putting the moves on Kendra or pressuring her into some sort of relationship, and Kendra who, obviously just kind of wants to do things on her own. I think it's really, really well done, and that's coupled with some top-notch artwork by young Rags Morales. You can see why he would later get drafted into a major DC event book called Identity Crisis from this. Also, I would say I like the fact that they use some kind of obscure DC characters like Shadow Thief and the Spider and stuff like that. Jeff Johns was always really good at working in obscure characters, and so was James Robinson. If you know him best, that would be from the Starman book I reviewed last year around this time. On the downside, there's some pacing problems with the book. I think the story really kind of drags. They're in India and they're dealing with the Chimera and the Machna. I kind of wish maybe that was more like an issue and a half rather than 2 full issues. Maybe they could have actually dropped the Machna and Chimera altogether and just gone after the Jewel. I think that would have been a little bit more entertaining. Also, the Hothset origin story just kind of feels a little out of place. Like, maybe it should have been at the end of the collection and not in the middle of it. Like I said, it just sort of feels a little weird and tacked on. I mean, I don't know if it's tacked on or just sort of distracting in terms of the narrative flow. But overall, this is still really, really enjoyable. This has always been kind of a personal favorite of mine. So I'm going to wind up giving this story a B. And with that, let's see what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, want to recommend a book to be placed in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box? Well, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcap productions, or just check the link in the description below and see how you can help make that happen.
Baby Ruth presents Moments with Great American Heroes.
Sure, there's a lot of bad guys out there, but gravity is my biggest enemy. And I'll be honest, my vision is not what it used to be. That's why I eat Baby Ruth. It's got all the energy in there to put me right back at the top of my game.
Your rival Lion Mane says that's cheating.
Cheating? He said that? How did he sound? Was he mad?
Baby Ruth from Nestle. This baby gets you going.